Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
We can hear you better.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We can
There
hear
was
you
an
now.
interruption.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so biblical messages. Then we will be talking about one other basic thing that we need to know before we enter into the actual work of sermon preparations and how it is presented. Haven't told us that one has to know what to say. The problem of a preacher is not what to say, but what not to say. Because what makes some people hate a preacher is what he shouldn't have said that he said. A preacher usually has a lot to say, but among all the things he has to say, there are a few things he must not say in preaching. So let's pick some personality traits needed in a preacher. What are the things that a preacher must have? Characteristics. Number one thing, we will mention about three of them and then we move on. Number one thing is piety. Piety here has to do with being godly. It's not pretense. Today on the pulpit, behind the audience or before audience, a lot of preachers are not pious. Piety is very important. A preacher must be godly, not just pretending about it. It has to be a lifestyle. In even theological colleges and Bible schools, we have too many of them who came to learn how to be a pastor, not necessarily that they have been called to become pastors. They learn how to speak as a pastor, how to dress like a pastor, how to respond to greetings like pastors and preachers, not because it is their life, but like learning a trade. Just like someone who has gone to learn plumbing work, you can call him, he will professionally fix your plumbing challenges in the house. A mechanic, he will fix your car issues. He has learned it. That's what many preachers represent today. They have learned how to preach. They have learned how to present religious papers and talks, but they are in them not pious. So piety is very important. A preacher must first of all be godly. You can bring it down to mean that he or she must have given his life to Christ. That is very fundamental. You don't preach Christ that you do not believe. You don't preach Christ that does not control your entire, must have given their life to Christ. I hope you are hearing me, please.
I am, but it's going a bit off and come back again. It's okay.
It's off and on, sir.
Hello, Mama Shirley, you were saying something.
I said it goes off and come back. It just goes off and on.
Yes, sir.
Okay, is it better now?
Yes, it is. It's very
Yes. Yes, sir.
So number one is a preacher must be pious. Number two is integrity. This is not a subject to emphasize so much, but in the context of what we are discussing, a preacher's integrity is sacrosanct.
I don't know what is holding his head is recalled for. That
Okay, it's like he's not speaking to us here. All right, he must have integrity. She must have integrity. What he says is what he does. Hello, director. Is director addressing us?
No, sir. His mic is on. He's not directing us, sir. You can go ahead.
Okay. It's okay. So, integrity is defined in this context as one, matching words with action. In other words, what you say is what you do. You don't preach another thing and you do another thing. In fact, the best way of preaching, of course, we have emphasized that preaching must be vocalized, but one's life and one's lifestyle is also a part of preaching. And that is what integrity means. Whatever you preach is also what you live. You live the preaching that you do. The last one is credibility. Credibility here refers to self-discipline. The preacher must be self-disciplined. The preacher must be one who is relentlessly honest. It must be someone who is totally honest and who can be trusted. Credibility. So it doesn't make sense that one knows how to preach but cannot be trusted. One knows how to preach but not honest or disciplined. These are the things that must be found in the life of any preacher. So let's go straight to parts of sermon. The sermon structure. What are the parts of sermon? Sermon has different parts. Growing up from my context, one thought that you just pick your Bible, read a passage, and then you start talking about it. But much later, I came to understand that you have to be orally in some presentation of every good sermon. There is no time one is presenting a sermon without following these steps, and that sermon will be considered correct. So if you want to present a biblical message, it has structure. And these are the structures. Number one is introduction. I will list them and then we talk about them briefly and continue from there. Number one is introduction. Number two is background. Number three is exegesis. Number four is application. Some people add illustration, but the two can go together. Application and illustration can go together. Then the last one is conclusion. The last one is conclusion. So let's give brief explanation to the parts of sermon as we have listed.
Sorry, sir. Please, I missed
Number
number
one.
3. Sorry, sir. Please, number 3.
Okay, number 3, exegesis.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Exegesis. EXEGESIS. Exegesis.
Thank you, sir.
Introduction, number 1, background. Okay. All right. So let's talk about introduction. We will give brief explanation to all these parts of sermons that we have listed. Number 1, introduction. Introduction is considered as the part of sermon that arouses and catches the interest of the listeners. It is that first statements that you make. You are not yet preaching, but of course, it's part of preaching. It can be a statement, it can be a story. This is the first things the preacher says before he continues in the message. It is targeted at securing the attention of the listeners. Introduction is meant to be short, brief, and catchy. For instance, you want to talk about that popular Bible passage, for God so loved the world, that passage. What can be your introduction? Your introduction is either statements or stories that will catch the attention of your audience and then whet their appetite, arouse them to know what next you want to say. It is what makes them sit up. They want to hear the preacher. The preacher is ready. The pastor is ready to preach. What is the next thing he wants to say? If you do not give a good introduction to your message, you are likely not going to have the attention of majority of your audience. So introduction is usually a very important part of every message. Then the other thing to consider while giving introduction is that you should give a clue to the main thrust of the sermon. There has to be, your introduction is the spirit of your sermon. The sermon is yet to come, but this is what is giving people sign of what the content of your sermon is going to look like. It provides directional focus to the aim of the sermon. That is what introduction does. To put it together, one has to sit down and figure out the kind of statements he can make to form his introduction or a suitable story. Many times, some preachers give introduction that is off the message they want to give. And like those of us who are in the theological school, we will say that your introduction has no connection to your message. And when such happens, the entire message is completely affected. So introduction is very important. If you are a teacher or even a public speaker, you understand what we are trying to say. But by way of summary, introduction is the first statement or story that you make that leads directly into your sermon, and it must be short, it must be brief, it must be necessary, and of course, catchy. That's how we'll explain that part of sermon. The next one is the background of the message. Background here has to do with what led to the passage you are going to preach or you are preaching from. The passage you read, in our own church, for instance, we read basically 3 Bible lessons. One from the New Testament, one from the letters of Paul, and one from the gospel. But recently, we hardly read from the letters in the New Testament. We just pick one from from the gospels, and then another from the Old Testament. Or we pick one from the Old Testament and then one from the letters of Paul. But in our system originally, we used to read 3. Whatever the case is, your sermon for the day is going to be picked from one of the passages, and then the other ones will support the message. That's what we call text. When you finish reading in a service, in a divine service situation, you are usually preaching from a particular Bible passage. And even in that passage, assuming you read up to 10 verses or more, or even lesser, most likely your text could be 1 or 2 verses, depending on the type of sermon. We will get to types of sermon, but let's get the structure first. So if you are preaching from a particular Bible text or even passage, your introduction is those events or event that led to that passage. The previous things that had happened before that passage you read, where you want to preach from. That is your background. For instance, let's take Moses, the call of Moses, where we read that he was tending the flock of Jethro, who happened to be his father-in-law. And somewhere there, he noticed a bush was burning and the bush was not consumed, and that attracted him. In an attempt to get close to see this sight, a voice called him. Assuming you read from that Bible passage, what should be your background? Your background is the person and work of Moses before the incident. Who is Moses? Where is he coming from? Basically, Moses, as we know, ran away from Egypt within this period and may have probably spent 10, 20 years in Midian. If you recall, I think in our previous class, in Old Testament class, OT survey, we mentioned that he ran to a city called Kenite, where he was taught the ways of Yahweh, and then many other things happened. So the background of this passage, for instance, is the things that had happened that led to this incident that we read. Your audience want to know who Moses is, why the assignment, that voice that called him, which later said, "My name is I am who I am." The audience want to know Moses' relationship with his past as it has to do with this voice that called him, who eventually is Yahweh himself. So that is the background. It is the incident, the previous events that led to that passage. Some authors would rather prefer to tell you to read 1, 2, 3 chapters before the chapter you are preaching. That is where you get your background. So background will have to do with the place, the situation or character, the circumstances, and even the feelings of both the primary and the tertiary speaker. That is, who is writing and who.
Now here, oh yeah, try this one. Because this one, I have limited yet it don't stop. I have limited credit here. This is where I stopped my credit to start with.
Sister Gloria.
Are we listening?
Yes, sir.
Are we listening?
Yes, sir. We are hearing you, sir.
All right. That's the summary of background of any message. But let's add that the background, for one to give a good background, you have to understand the circumstance surrounding the character, either the one speaking or the one being presented in a passage. Let's pick something from the New Testament. When Paul wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord," I repeat, rejoice, or again, I say, rejoice. What is the background of this passage? One may just assume that Paul was speaking from a festive mood, a time of party, a time of celebration. But a closer study will reveal that Paul was actually writing from the prison. And Paul was around the time he was about to be executed. And then he was encouraging the church here and was telling the church to be happy in the Lord. So it is your ability to discover the situation within which the writer or the character is speaking that will make a good background for your message. If you are able to discover that, no, this man was not writing when he was in a good condition. He was actually writing from a smelling, bad environment of Roman prison. And then he was telling the church to rejoice. And he repeated, again, I say rejoice. When you are able to discover that he was writing from the prison and in a bad situation, you'll be able to present a good message from that Bible passage. It is from here you'll be able to draw your exegesis, your application, and even your exegesis. You'll be able to build a good exegesis and then, of course, application if you have gotten a good background, so that when you are applying that message, you'll be able to speak to those who are in trouble, those who are mourning, those who are in pain, those who are in sickness and lack, because the message was not just for those who are in good condition, but even meant for those who are in a very bad condition. Let's summarize background by adding that you need to understand the context which is part of what we have said, of the speaker or the Bible passage in question. Context here means you can connect tradition. It can also connect custom. What were the things obtainable in the life and realities in the background or in the passage you are preaching from? Take for instance, cultures are different. If in the culture where the passage was written accepts women wearing trousers, is it cultural or a standard? You need to know what is obtainable depending on the message contained there. If that passage of the Bible encourages wearing trousers, you need to know that it is contextual and shouldn't be made a standard for everybody to practice. There is this controversial Bible passage which keeps keeping the church busy for those who make the argument. When the Bible will say women should not wear what pertaineth to men. And then every generation of Christian community battle with this particular command or law in the Old Testament. Now, for you to get a good background, you ask yourself, is this thing not cultural? If the answer is yes, like in that particular context, that was God giving the Jews specific laws on how he wanted their life to look like. And then he gave them that one. One of the questions scholars ask is, what actually are the things that pertain to women, to men, that women shouldn't put on? Is it slippers, bathroom slippers? People will tell you, well, it's unisex. What about t-shirts, polo? People will tell you, well, some of them are unisex. What about knicker? Because I am mentioning all these because both sexes wear them. Okay, is it only trouser? And then some people will still tell you, well, there are trousers that are meant for women and there are some for men. So which one shouldn't women wear? Well, some conservatives, like the Presbyterians, will tell you, well, no woman should wear trouser. Well, if women don't wear trouser, should they wear slippers? What about boxers? Because I noticed that even some women who preach this, who are very strict about what people should wear and what people shouldn't wear, some of them in their houses wear knicker and even trousers when they are sleeping or something. Where is trouser not supposed to be worn? We are just mentioning this because some of the things written in your passage could be contextual, and you have to understand it as such to be able to know how you relate it to your audience or your congregation. In that passage, when you read down a bit, you will hear that nobody should plant two different crops on the same land. So if we are planting yam here, for those who have been farmers or you know farming, you plant yam here. You don't plant any other thing where you planted yam. You have to move to another part of the land and plant cassava. Then your corn should be also separate. Your vegetables should be separate. It is also contained in that Bible passage. But that is to say, mixed cropping is a sin, as much as how we look at those who wear, the women that wear trousers. And then somewhere there you see God telling them, you don't wear cloth with many colors. Your cloth must be one color. So if we look at all of us here, you find out that you are putting on cloth that has more than one color. And it is also a sin in that Bible passage. So, like me, I'm wearing ash color, and then my trouser is black background with a touch of red and white here and there. I am a sinner as far as that Bible passage is concerned. So for you to get a good background, you have to understand that this passage basically is contextual. It is speaking to the Jews in this background and may not be applied wholly to me in Nigeria or to this other lady in the US. You have to be able to do that. That is background. Are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Okay, thank you. Can I hear the voice of other people? We are 6 here. I hope the others are hearing.
We are hearing.
Yes, we are
I'm
hearing
hearing
you.
too. I'm hearing.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, the next one is exegesis. Exegesis simply means interpretation. This is where you retell the story of your Bible passage. Where you read, it is around here. You try to retell the story and give interpretation to the story. Interpretation here is not just what you feel. You are not telling your congregation what you feel the meaning of that passage is. No, you are rather giving the actual meaning. So for you to give the actual meaning, you have to first of all know the author's original mood. The writer, what is his mood in that passage? That is one. Number two, you have to know his experience and intent. You cannot give a good interpretation of any passage if you do not know who wrote it. Because you are not just saying what you feel. That is what we call imposition. You are saying the real thing, the actual meaning of that passage. And it is only possible when you know the original mood of the author, the author's experience, and his or her intent. These three things are considered. Okay, having said that, one other fact is also obvious. One need to know that there was a particular time when that message was written and there is a distance. Take for instance, when you are preaching in Nigeria from the Bible, you need to know that there's a time gap and a distance gap that you have to put into consideration. You have to put into consideration time gap and distance gap. Time gap here means the difference between the date that passage was written and 21st century, precisely 2022, is a serious matter in trying to give interpretation to the Bible. You have to know that time has really passed, and that will guide you in what you say as the interpretation of that passage. And then distance here connects what we already mentioned around the background, the context of the work or the text being discussed. Apart from these two, you also have to put into consideration some other encumbrances of this author, like language, his language, cultural bias, of course, literary differences, and then even communication and sociopolitical differences. Let me try to give a little explanation to this. Okay, I have said that apart from time and distance gaps, you will also consider the language, culture, literature, communication, and socio-political differences between the writer or the work you are about to interpret, and then the people who will receive the interpretation. These factors are different in the two contexts. The way Paul sees certain political activities is not the same way it happens in Nigeria. The communication skill and meaning of Moses is definitely not the same with ours in Nigeria, and of course, language. Now, because of these factors, the preacher is in a very serious task to be able to give the correct interpretation, not I keep emphasizing what he or she feels the passage saying, what the actual and correct interpretation. But this is why we even study the original languages found in the Bible. Hebrew language, Greek language, and a little Aramaic, because you know, if you call our Old Testament, I told us that the Bible was written, the Old Testament was written in Hebrew and Aramaic, but Hebrew contains about 98%, and then Aramaic 2%. Then the whole of the New Testament is believed to have been written originally in Greek. That is why theological schools teach these languages, so that some of those words that are not very common, you can go back to its etymology to understand the original intent and meaning of that passage. Now, there are things you will read in the Bible that the language difference could mislead an ignorant speaker. That is why you have to learn to use some other useful Christian sources and materials. So to do a good exegesis, okay, let me say this now. You know that, just to buttress the point of language, that certain things you call, you say, that I say, may have different meanings. Since I am an Igbo, I know that there are things my community will say, another community will say, but the meaning will be different. For instance, my community will call yam. My community G as in J-I. Community will G, and then every back community will call B. My community will call yam G, and call husband D. Yam G, J-I. That is yam in my tongue. Then D, D-I. D-I. D is husband in my community, in my tongue. Then when you come to every G, which is yam in my tongue, is they call it D, and then they call D my own G. So yam in my tongue means husband in every tongue. Then husband means yam in my tongue. This is the what one find in language at and it's also located in the Bible during interpretation. So what you do is to become familiar with some Christian sources and literature, such as Bible articles, commentaries, dictionaries, that Bible commentaries, Bible dictionaries, and then some handbooks. That you have to read some
Sir, your network is very bad. Can't hear you. Can't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Okay.
No, you. I can't hear you.
Maybe you can change position, sir.
Oh, okay. What was last thing you heard?
I
You were
can't even
trying
remember.
to, what you were trying, you were talking about your language, how they say man and yam. That was the last part I heard. Man being called D and the other one.
Husband and young.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Is it better now?
Much better. Very clear.
It's much better.
Are you hearing me now?
Yes.
It is very clear.
All right. So I was saying, okay, that is part of language problem, and it is also located at various places across the Bible. So for you to give good interpretation or exegesis, you have to be versed in the language of the Bible. But since we may not know everything, it's important you consult some Christian resources, such as Bible atlases, Bible commentaries, Bible dictionaries, and even some good Bible handbooks. You can also get some Bible handbooks to use. These are the things that you need to consult in order to get good interpretation of the passage where you have read. The reason why you need to consult them is the authors, those good ones, the authors know better, or or may have known more about the original Bible languages. So they interpreted. Are we hearing? Are we hearing me?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. So that is why you should consult those Christian resources. Let's note here that there are some of them that are not really very good. Some commentaries, some basically commentaries, and some dictionaries, even handbooks. So before you buy, you consult people like Okoha here. Reverend Okoha is good. He knows quite a lot about good materials that you need. So you get good commentaries, you get good Bible dictionaries, and some Christian handbooks that will help you, give you interpretation of the Bible passages where you want to preach. That is it about exegesis. Now, by way of concluding on it, whenever a preacher did not give good interpretation, the application will always be wrong. There is no two ways about it. As long as your interpretation or your exegesis is wrong, your delivery, your application will also be wrong. And this is one of the major problems of preachers today, where we hear all kinds of interpretations about passages in the Bible. People do not go back to the true meaning of where they have read or where they want to preach from. They just give the church what they feel is the meaning of what they have read. That is why the church is filled with junks as biblical beliefs and information. So many things the church today believe are very wrong. So many wrong beliefs everywhere. The reason is not far-fetched. Preachers are responsible for it. They did not get the correct meaning of the passages they preached. And so the congregations are filled with whatever the preacher says is correct. Once in a while, we even read or watch in video clips some from where a preacher, after reading a particular passage, encouraged the members to lie down by way of respecting the prophet so that he will march on them. They will be able to receive the prophet's reward. That is his understanding. And congregation, innocent people, they all laid down and the preacher was stepping on each of them as an impartation. That's the interpretation that he was able to derive from the Bible passage where he read. Lastly, on this, the church, our audience, can either become better or worse due to what we give them as interpretation. It's very, very important. So don't rush to go and preach if you have not prepared. And preparation is just what we are talking about. Go back to study the Bible and then consult these materials we mentioned so that you don't give the church the wrong information. The last one, application. Application. You know, the first one, I hope we can still remember. Introduction is the first one. The second one is background. The third one now is interpretation, interpretation or exegesis. Now, the fourth one is application. We have already touched application, but here application means communicating this interpretation to the context and realities of the audience. When you have given the meaning of that Bible passage, relating it to the realities of the audience is what application means. Application here is a kind of a summon the hearers are brought into for a decisive action. It is telling the audience what to do. Haven't heard all that we have said. This is where it concerns you. It's like, this is what they have done. This is what has happened. You go and do likewise. So application is simply about giving your audience action line. This is what has happened in the Bible. This is what you are expected to do. So you are bringing what has happened into their own world, into their own reality. And of course, we warn again that you have to get the eye in.
Not hearing, no.
We can't hear you anymore, sir.
It should be network. Please just wait a while.
Interpretation correctly. Sorry, something happened. Did you? Are you hearing me, please?
Yes, sir. We are hearing you.
Okay. Let's try to put it together that you have to get the interpretation correctly before you be able to apply it rightly to the audience. Now, the last one, okay, the one that is connected to interpretation is illustration. Illustration may be there or not, depending on your message and maybe space, like time. Illustration has to do with maybe a story or bringing into your message an event that will drag your message home the way the audience will no longer forget what you have preached. It's a kind of a story that will bring home your message. It is not always found in every message, but where it is applicable, it is always correct. But whatever you will add to your application that will be easy for the members to remember what you have applied is what illustration means. It's possible you have seen a preacher somewhere in the message. He introduces a playlet. 2-3 persons will come out before the congregation and they will perform a very short drama. That is an illustration. If you don't remember everything that the preacher said, you will remember the drama. Illustration summarizes the application of a message. It must not be a drama. It can be a story. It can be a kind of image you paint. It can be a short drama, like we have said. That is illustration. Then lastly, conclusion. Conclusion is conclusion everywhere. If you have read about anything concerning conclusion, it's the same thing in sermon presentation. In sermon presentation, when it is time for you to conclude, you conclude. And it means giving a short summary of everything you have said. But there is something important in conclusion. In our own Reformed tradition, there is nothing one can do without Jesus. So when you want to conclude a message, if you have not been emphasizing Jesus, which is important, at every stage of your message, Jesus is emphasized. But at the point of conclusion, it must be Jesus that will conclude the message. You have to tell the church, although all these things were able to happen by maybe holy living and all that, then at this point, without Jesus, you cannot live a holy life. Jesus must be the center of every sermon conclusion. All right. That's what we can do today on this part of our lecture. I'd like you please to give me 3 minutes. I will be back. Please, just in 3 minutes, I will come back. Someone came in here to see me. 3 minutes, please.
Okay, sir.
Okay, I'm back. Hello, are you here?
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mommy Shelley. Are other people around?
We are around.
Okay.
We are here.
All right. Okay, this is where we will stop on this course for today, preaching biblical messages. This is where we will stop. It's already about 1 hour gone. You will pardon me again. I have a visitor who is also running out in a short while, and there are things I need to discuss with him. We should be going into Old Testament now, but it won't be possible today. Please forgive me. by next week, we will start with the Old Testament. Let's stop the lectures here. Director, I hope you forgive me. I didn't know
sir.
that.
Hello, sir. Won't we ask you some questions? Won't you take some questions?
Come now. Okay. Yes. Ask one or two questions. Then next week we'll continue with the Old Testament. Okay. Go ahead.
Hello, sir. I am Gloria Okonya, and I want to know the point in these 4 points of preaching biblical messages.
Sorry, say it again.
You know, there are 4 points. There are 4 points in preaching biblical messages: introduction, background. Then I missed the top, which is forgotten it. Then application.
Okay, exegesis or interpretation. Have you taken that? Hello, Mommy Gloria.
I have written it, but I don't.
Okay, you mean the introduction, the meaning?
Yes, sir. No, I know the meaning, but
okay,
the introduction aspect.
Okay, okay, you do not understand the introduction aspect of a sermon. Hello? Oh, hello. Network.
I am hearing, I'm hearing.
Okay. Okay, did you say you did not understand the introduction? Oh, I can't hear you. If you are hearing me, I suspect the director recorded this lecture.
Okay. Okay.
Usually he records it. So you play it, please.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Any other question? Any other question,
sir,
please?
Another question is the background, sir.
Okay. What's your question there?
That is how to paint the picture of the background.
Okay. You know, we said that the background has to discuss the place, the date, the context, and even the word of the text. It's something you have to study about. Usually, some authors will quickly tell you to go back to the first few chapters before where you want to preach from. That is the background. You have to know the word of the character or the writer of that passage, depending on where you are preaching from. That is what background means. You can also listen to the record again.
Okay, sir. Okay. So, you know, all right. In the this, are you hearing? That is, you know,
I'm hearing you.
The most difficult one, to my understanding, is this interpretation.
The interpretation.
Yes,
okay. Yes. Okay. The best way to treat interpretation is to consult the commentaries. But first of all, sermon, because the major part of it, all of them are very important. But this interpretation is very key to your message. So first of all, you must have prayed. The Holy Spirit must have guided you. The Holy Spirit plays a very important role in interpretation. Haven't been filled by the Holy Spirit to give you the meaning. Do compare what you have gotten as the meaning with some commentaries, good ones around. That's the best way to approach interpretation. I again refer you to the record. You listen to it again, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right.
Sending it to me.
Okay, let me appreciate us for participating again today. God bless you. Let's meet again by 10 o'clock next week, Saturday. By God's grace, we'll pick our Old Testament next week. Have a nice weekend.
You too.
And you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Director, please
You
forgive
too,
me.
sir. Bye.
All right.
Auntie Gloria. Auntie Gloria, are you still there? Auntie Gloria.
So I am listening to you.
You were talking about that interpretation, but just unmute yourself and let's just talk a bit before the time, since we still have time. We can just discuss a bit.
Okay.
Okay, it says the first one. Just unmute. Yeah, okay, but I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can, my dad.
Okay, the first one that he talked about was introduction. It says the introduction you must, what I jotted down, it says you must be able to connect with the sermon. You must be able to, that is, talk what is the sermon going to be about. We're going to discuss, that is, give a brief insight of what is going to, what is sermon, what you're going to talk about. That's the introduction. Then the second part, it says the background. The background is you have to like connect it between the Old and the New Testament, like we normally do in our own parish now.
Yes.
Connect the Old and the New, you find out the link. And then the interpretation, it says you have to know from the mood at which the person was that wrote the text. Huh? You have to try and know the mood the person was that was writing the text. And then after that one, you now go to application. Then you now apply it. Are you understanding?
Okay. Yes, I do.
You now do the application. After you now apply it, then you now do the illustration. Now the illustration and the application, they normally move hand in hand sometimes. But the illustration, maybe when you are preaching, you can pause and bring in people like drama groups to come and illustrate the kind of message you are sending across. Or some kind of experience, some stories that people will remember. The sermon, you know, there are some sermons people will just stop, they will not remember after that Sunday. But there are some drama that attach with the sermon that they will always remember. And then we now go to the conclusion. The conclusion must be centered on Jesus Christ, basically. That is, the conclusion is everything that you discuss, you now somewhat link down to Jesus Christ. So apart from that, there is no other problem. Any other question?
I am very, very grateful. Very grateful.
I was hearing you, we could hear you very well, but you couldn't hear us, even when your driver was trying to connect it.
I think she was having issues with her.
Hello, ma.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir.
Morning, my dear. I was thinking the director would have used this opportunity to finish up with what we did last year.
You know, he's not even around, because if you notice, it's just us that is here. If you look at it, you just find out that it's just us. So maybe he has an issue with his network. So that's why he signed out. So I said, okay, instead of us just letting time just go, let's just talk among ourselves.
It's all right.
But the one of last week, the one that is still baffling me, I don't know whether anybody has actually looked at it. The one that he was talking about, that we all assumed that there were three people that brought gifts to Jesus Christ, the three wise men. I'm still baffling about it to find out whether it was three or there was really no number.
I also enjoyed it too. It's an interesting thing. You know, most times, like some of us, back in the days, 50-something years back or thereabout, we were taught some of these things, even in the primary school.
Exactly.
Now, but the fact remains that, yes, at times there are obvious mistakes that we carry along, and it becomes like a norm, which is not. You remember that very passage he cited. He didn't talk about three of them. He just mentioned the wise men. And most times we just read like that. Then the sermon goes about even mentioning three, whereas it's not three in the scripture.
In the passage, in the particular passage,
yes,
I think that what you need to, that's when one is preaching, you look or concentrate on that particular passage that you are reading, since the apostles, that the writers gave their own accounts of the story. So the one that you are talking about, or where you read the text you read, I think it's wise or good to center your message around that particular, like where somebody mentioned the three wise men, and then another passage it was not mentioned. So
no, I
if you read,
madam,
and research, yes.
Can you take us to where we have such mentioned?
Because I went through it. I am looking for other Bible passages to, what's that thing again? I keep forgetting. To actually look for where it is stated three. I have looked through some that I have. I have checked NIV, I've checked King James, I've checked New Living. At least none, I have not seen anyone that stated three. The only
That's what I'm saying. That's why I'm saying
is that they just mentioned the gift.
That's why I said I have not really checked, but what I'm actually saying is that what we read, that any passage we read, that we should concentrate or that is move our preaching within what we read, so that we will not lead people astray by saying quoting something up-head or what we have been taught long ago that must have been wrong.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's the essence of the study.
Then I want to ask in conclusion of today's own, that we now say that our conclusion should center on where we call on people to give their lives to Christ as the center of the gospel.
I think so. Apart from even giving your life to
that's the implication.
people
that's
like Christ. That's what he's actually saying. Even after we have actually made the conclusion to center on Jesus Christ, we can actually make altar calls at that junction for people to actually come out and give their life to Christ. But the thing is that it must be centered at the end on Jesus Christ. That's just the only
thing. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank God, man.
Auntie
Gloria, are you okay? Brother Ikpe, I have not heard your voice. Are you still with us?
I think it's gone. I think we call it a day.
Okay, sir. Okay, very well.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Well said.
Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
And have a lovely weekend.
You people are strong. And you are all a strong team.
Thank God.
Bye, sir.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah.